Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the frostbitten, mud-caked shoes of a medieval servant. You're standing at the edge of a noble's manor, somewhere in 14th century England. The mist hangs low, the ground is wet and uneven, and you're clinging to your only set of patched-up clothes. The stone walls of the manor rise in front of you like a prison with window shutters. The gates creak open, and you walk inside not as a guest, but as someone who'll be sweeping those gates. Later, probably twice, the smell hits you first. It's not unbearable, but it's rich. A warm blend of livestock, boiled onions, damp wool, and something more mysterious, perhaps the scent of history. Or maybe it's just a dead rat under the floorboards. Your new home is bustling. Chickens dart underfoot. A boy no older than 9 is chasing a runaway goose while trying to hold his trousers up. A woman with sleeves rolled up to her elbows gives you a side glance before disappearing into the kitchens, where steam and shouting blend into one continuous roar. You're not special here. You're one more body for labor. Maybe you were born a villain tied to the land, property of the Lord. Or maybe you're here as punishment, or debt, or simply because life outside the manor walls was even worse. One thing's for sure, you're not here by choice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is. I'm curious if anyone's listening to medieval misery at 3 a.m. from their cozy bed in Australia. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the manor gate, and a steward approaches. His tunic is better quality than yours, but he's not noble, just someone who's been here longer. He doesn't greet you with a smile, just a quick nod and the words, "You'll be scrubbing floors. Stables need dung cleared too. Come on." And that's your welcome ceremony. Your quarters aren't exactly private. You're led to the servants' dormitory, which is more like a cramped wooden shed attached to the back of the manor. You'll be sleeping on a straw mattress that crunches when you sit down, and not from comfort. Hopefully that's just leftover grain and not something still alive inside. Your first day. It starts before the rooster crows. Actually, you have to wake the rooster. Servants often rise as early as 4 a.m., especially in winter when fires need lighting. No, not cozy fireplace, Instagram fires. These are temperamental hearths that sputter and hiss like they're offended you woke them. Your job is to kneel in the ash and coax a flame into wet logs using flint, determination, and a total lack of safety instructions. Then come the chamber pots. You know those, right? Fancy medieval toilets. Yeah, they're not toilets. They're buckets. Ceramic or metal. Usually, and guess who gets to carry them outside and dump them in the midden heap? That's right, lucky you. A noble family might have 10 people, but they'll have dozens of pots. Guests, children, old Aunt Marjorie with her condition. And the pots must be emptied before breakfast, or there'll be hell to pay. Literal, screaming, sometimes hair-pulling. If you're unlucky, a thrown ladle. Historians still argue whether servants felt pride in their work or simply disassociated through the horror of it. The truth likely lies somewhere between professional detachment and recurring nightmares. As you carry your first sloshing pot of waste across the frozen courtyard, you feel your fingers go numb. Your breath clouds the air, and your shoes made of roughly stitched leather are already soaked. You're starting to understand why nobody romanticizes this part of history in movies. There's no dramatic violin music playing when your foot sinks ankle-deep into a patch of animal muck. And this is just the start. As you walk back into the manor house, you notice something odd. People keep their heads down, not just because they're busy, but because eye contact with nobles can get you in trouble. If the Lord's daughter catches you staring, you might be accused of insolence. If the Lord himself notices you at all, it's probably because something hasn't been cleaned. Invisibility is your best defense. Here's a fun fact to distract you. Some manor houses were built with secret servant passageways, so staff could move through the building unseen, like medieval ghosts. Sadly, this manor didn't invest in that. So you trudge the halls like a visible reminder of class division. You make your way to the laundry room. Correction, laundry area. It's a freezing corner with buckets of cold water and lye soap that stings your hands. You're tasked with scrubbing your own tunic, one of the only pieces of clothing you own, along with linen sheets from the master's chamber. The irony. Your wash water is dirtier than the thing you're washing. But don't say anything. You're still being watched. There's always someone above you. The steward, the cook, the reeve. Even other servants who've been here longer can boss you around. It's like a ladder, and you're the rung that touches the manure. But there's one glimmer of hope. Dinner, or more accurately, it's a stew of grains, water, and maybe, if the cook is feeling generous, a hint of turnip. You get to eat from a communal pot with a wooden spoon you carry around. Your hands are still raw from lye soap, but it tastes ... okay. Hunger does. That, a quirky tidbit. Some medieval servants believed that whistling indoors could summon evil spirits. So everyone slurps in awkward silence, except for the occasional coughing fit, or the clatter of someone dropping their spoon as dusk rolls in. You sweep out the great hall. Not for the first time, nobles drag in mud on their fancy boots, and someone spilled wine earlier. You crouch, scrub, sweep, repeat. Your back aches, your knees protest. But there's no stopping yet. Eventually, you return to the dormitory. A single tallow candle flickers. You collapse onto your straw mattress, bones sore, fingers numb, and hair smelling faintly of lard and fireplace soot. Someone next to you snores like a wounded pig. You wrap your thin wool blanket tighter and close your eyes. You're not going to sleep easily, but at least for now, there are no more chamber pots. Asterisk. You're jolted awake by the blunt clang of a bell, not the elegant tolling of a church bell. No, this is a clumsy, rusted thing tied to a wooden beam just outside the dormitory. Someone, probably the steward, is hammering it like they're furious at the air itself. You groan and sit up. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. The straw mattress has done you no favors, and you're fairly certain you now share it with at least one insect that's grown emotionally attached to you. No time to complain. Dawn hasn't broken yet, but your duties have. You pull on your same rough woolen tunic, the one that still smells like lye soap and desperation. Your feet go into stiff, cracked shoes with damp soles, and you step out into the manor courtyard. The sky is still a dull grey, like someone forgot to turn the lights on. A rooster crows in the distance, but you're already ahead of him. First task, chamber pots again. Because if there's one thing you can count on in this job, it's that people will keep using the bathroom. There's a rhythm to it now. Lift, carry, dump, gag, repeat. You try not to breathe through your nose, but it's winter, and your mouth fogs up like a chimney. Some of the pots are full to the brim. Some are warm. You don't think about it too much. That's how people survive here, by disconnecting part of their brain and pretending this is totally normal behavior. As you shuffle through the manor, balancing 2 buckets of human waste, you pass another servant, a girl no older than a sack of firewood nearly her own size. She's not crying, but her face has that blank look of someone who gave up crying a long time ago. You nod in shared misery. Misery loves company, especially when the company is equally filthy. Historians still argue whether the average medieval servant felt solidarity with one another, or whether competition and scarcity made every man and woman for themselves. But in this manner, the unspoken rule is simple. Get through the day without getting yelled at, injured, or thrown out. Once the pots are empty, you head toward the kitchen, not to eat, of course. You're here to clean. The cook is already shouting. Shouting at the fire, shouting at her assistants, shouting at a chicken that refuses to stay dead. You dodge a flung ladle and get to scrubbing the stone floors. The kitchen is the beating heart of the manor. It's also a battlefield. A thick cloud of smoke hovers in the air, flavored with meat fat, burnt onions, and fury. You slip once on a patch of spilled gravy and nearly land in a basket of spoiled turnips. Watch your feet, dung brain. Someone barks, probably the assistant cook. That's your nickname now, dung brain. Charming. You're assigned to tend the scullery. That's where the dishes go after the noble family finishes dining in the hall. Platters, goblets, knives, spoons, dozens of them, and all covered in bits of roast meat, fish bones, clumps of porridge, and soggy bread. You scrape it off into a bucket, then scrub with sand and water. No soap, just sand and willpower. One interesting historical fact: soap was a luxury in many medieval homes, especially for servants. Most commoners cleaned with ashes, lye, or whatever mildly abrasive thing they could find. The idea of hygiene was more about visible cleanliness than killing germs, which weren't even a known concept yet. At one point, while washing out a goblet, you spot something wriggling inside. A small beetle. You fish it out, shrug, and finish cleaning. Nothing surprises you anymore. Your stomach growls. You won't eat until hours from now, and even then, it'll be more gruel than grandeur. But for the noble family upstairs, breakfast is already being prepared. You hear the cook yelling about poached eggs, honeyed figs, and imported spices. Imported. Imagine that. You've never even seen a real lemon, but apparently they've got one. Locked in a box, you leave the kitchen to begin your next charming task: sweeping the main hall again and scrubbing the rushes on the floor. Rushes are basically nature's attempt at a carpet, a layer of straw or grass mixed with herbs like lavender or mint to hide the smell. Of course, it only masks it for about a day. Then it's just a soggy pile of dirt and rat droppings. A quirky tidbit for you: sometimes people would sprinkle dried rosemary or marjoram among the rushes to ward off evil spirits. Apparently, even spirits didn't want to smell feet and fish. Bones. The rushes are disgusting. You rake them with a crude wooden broom, lifting layers of grime as old as your employment. Occasionally, you find things inside. A fork, a dead mouse. One time, a broken ivory comb which the steward took immediately. You never see nice things for long. As you work, nobles pass through the hall, barely noticing you. One of the younger ones, a boy around your age, but dressed like a peacock, snorts as he walks by and says, "Try scrubbing harder." The floor still looks like you. You don't reply, you just keep scrubbing. What would you even say? He's right, sort of. You do look like the floor. The manor is alive with noise, clanging pots, barking dogs, a bard playing a lute somewhere, terribly. The servants move like ants in a colony, always working, always tired. There's no such thing as off-duty here. You sleep, you wake, you serve by midday, your arms are sore, your knees are bruised, and your hands are raw. And guess what? It's time for more chamber pots. Because when one job ends, another begins. You make a mental list of every task you've done so far today. Cleaned waste, scrubbed floors, tended fires, scraped dishes, swept rushes. You're not even halfway through the day, and nobody has said thank you. Not once. Gratitude is not a currency used in this manner. You take a short break near the stable wall, hiding from the wind. A black cat strolls by and stops to stare. At you, you stare back. It blinks slowly, then saunters away like it knows something you don't. You wonder if it's been reincarnated. Honestly, you envy it either way. Fun side note. In some medieval towns, black cats were believed to be witches in disguise. In others, they were considered good luck. The inconsistency feels very on brand for the Middle Ages. You exhale, your breath fogs the air again. Your tunic clings to your back with cold sweat. You consider running away. But where would you go? The next manor, the woods, the town. All of them come with their own versions of misery. At least here, you know what kind of terrible awaits you. So you stand up, stretch your back, and walk back into the manor. Because there are still pots to empty, still floors to sweep, and still no one will remember your name, asterisk. By now, your muscles ache in a slow, rhythmic sort of way, like the manor has wrapped its stone fingers around your spine and squeezed. But aching doesn't mean stopping. Servants don't get to rest because they're sore. You're not a guest. Here, you're a tool, and tools don't complain. At least, not out loud. After your short break behind the stable, the steward finds you. His face is a permanent scowl, like it was carved that way. There's muck behind the privies, he says, not looking at you. Scrape it up and toss it beyond the pasture wall. And Hurry Lord's cousins are arriving tomorrow. You don't sigh, not visibly. You just nod and pick up the long-handled wooden spade, the kind that's more splinter than tool. As you trudge across the frozen mud, you wonder if tomorrow's guests will even glance in your direction. Probably not. If they do, it'll be to wrinkle their noses and wonder aloud why no one cleans up after the animals. Spoiler, you're the no one. Behind the privies, the smell is biblical. The freezing air does little to mask it. You start scooping, thick, damp, sticky, cow dung, horse droppings, kitchen slop. All of it blends together in a pile that looks like it could crawl off on its own. You scrape it into a wheelbarrow that wobbles like it's dying and push it to the wall. It's not glamorous. Nothing about this job is. But here's your fringe fact of the hour. Some medieval manors used this waste as fertilizer for their vegetable gardens. Yes, that's right. The same vegetables the nobles eat may have been grown with the help of what you just hold in a splintery barrow. Life is a circle. A very gross, squishy circle. Once you're done dumping the mess behind the wall, you get a moment to just want to stand still and stretch your back. You look out across the fields. Frost sparkles on the dead grass. The manor behind you looms, large, with smoke curling from the chimneys. Somewhere inside, a fire roars in a noble's chamber, and someone sips warm wine. You, on the other hand, have manure on your boots and mud crusted behind your ears. Back inside, the steward waves you. Over again, Stablemaster needs help, he grunts. The foal's stuck in the birthing pen. Ah, excellent. You're off to assist in animal birth now. You jog to the stables, heart pounding not from excitement, but from the sheer unpredictability of your daily assignments. The stable is warm relatively. The smell is thick with hay, sweat, and horse breath. A mare stands, wide-eyed and snorting, stomping the ground. Behind her, a young stable boy looks panicked. She's been struggling, he mutters. Foal's turned wrong. You know nothing about horses, but neither does the stable boy. And the stablemaster is apparently fetching something, which means the two of you are alone with a very large, very distressed animal. The stable boy hands you a wet cloth. We're supposed to keep her calm, so you speak gently, whispering nonsense as if the mare understands English, which, to be fair, is still more likely than a noble listening to a servant. Eventually, the stablemaster arrives, grumbling about lazy hands and stupid beasts. He manages to get the foal turned around. It emerges slick and trembling, flopping onto the straw like something from a myth. For a moment, you just watch it, breathe its tiny chest, rising and falling. You're elbow deep in straw, but somehow this moment feels real, like you've touched something ancient, life and death, wrapped in hay and sweat and the rank smell of the stable. Nobody will thank you for helping. You'll probably have to clean the pen next, but for just a second, it feels ... important. Historians still argue whether servants felt any spiritual connection to the work they did with animals, or if they simply viewed it as another chore in a long line of indignities. Maybe both, maybe neither. But this foal, struggling to stand on wobbly legs, that's a moment that sticks with you. Of course, the moment doesn't last. It never does. By late afternoon, the sky dims into a soggy grey again, and the steward finds you, of course, he doesn't, informs you that the main hall must be spotless before sunset. The Lord's cousins are arriving tomorrow, remember, and they must not, under any circumstances, step in horse dung or see a single hair out of place on the rush-covered floor. You're starting to hate these cousins. You've never met them, but you know they'll wear velvet and complain about the draft. You know they'll toss their cloaks at you without saying a word. You know their boots will be polished by you tomorrow morning. Still, you head back inside and start cleaning again. You scrub the floors. Again, you straighten the benches. Again, you even dust the carved wooden rafters, standing on a wobbly stool with a cloth wrapped around your hand like a makeshift glove. Somewhere above you, a spider watches with quiet judgment. Here's a fun tidbit. Some manors were so proud of their decorative ceilings that servants weren't even allowed to look up while cleaning. Not because of superstition, just snobbery. In this manor, they don't care where you look, as long as you get the grime out of every corner. As you wipe down a stone windowsill, you hear the bard again. Same guy from yesterday, still butchering his lute. He's practicing a ballad about some distant war, singing in a nasal voice that makes the lyrics sound like a goose choking on porridge. You'll hear this tune at supper. A maid mutters as she passes you. Try not to stab your ears with a spoon. You smile, just barely. That's the thing about life. Here it's miserable, sure, but sometimes the shared misery makes space for humor. Quiet jokes, eye rolls, little flashes of rebellion. Dinner is still hours away, but you're already being ordered to help with preparations. You're sent to the kitchen to carry in the barrels ale, salted fish, sacks of flour. Each barrel feels like it weighs as much as a cow. You struggle not to drop them, sweat pouring down your neck even in the cold air. The cook barks at everyone. The assistant cooks argue. Someone spills honey and gets smacked with a ladle. You duck, carry, lift, repeat. There's no rhythm to it, just chaos. And here's the kicker. You don't even get to eat dinner with the nobles. You don't even get to see what they're served. You'll eat later, once the scraps come back down. If there are scraps, you find yourself envying the rats. They get first pick in the pantry. After all, at last, the sun begins to set, painting the stone walls with cold amber light. You light the sconces along the hallway, carefully shielding the flame as you go. The flickering glow dances across old tapestries and carved wooden beams. The manor looks quiet, almost holy in the low light. But you know better. You know there are still fires to stoke, dishes to wash, boots to clean, clothes to mend, beds too warm. So you take a deep breath, roll your aching shoulders, and head for the laundry room, because this day still isn't over. The laundry room smells like damp wool, stale sweat, and a hint of something vaguely floral that you suspect is a desperate attempt by the lady of the house to mask the manor's more ... earthy odors. You shuffle in, your boots slapping against the cold stone floor. A large wooden tub sits in the middle, half filled with murky water. You dip your hands in, the chill biting through your threadbare sleeves, and brace yourself for what's next. Laundry in medieval times isn't just tossing clothes in a washing machine and pushing a button. No, it's a process that requires buckets, boiling water, a good amount of elbow grease, and, as you quickly learn, patience that is thinner than the thin linens you're washing. You start by pulling out the linens and rough tunics from the basket, a pile that looks as if it's been fished from a swamp. Your fingers numb almost immediately as you dunk them into the tub and begin scrubbing with a stiff brush made from the bristles of Hunaswat animal. The fabric's rough texture scrapes your skin raw in places, but you can't stop. The Lord's shirts have to look presentable, or at least less miserable than the servants. As you scrub, you remember a quirky fact you read in a book once. Some medieval people used fermented urine to bleach their clothes. Yes, you read that right. P. The ammonia in it helped whiten fabric in a way soap couldn't. You're not sure if this manner is that advanced or that disgusting, but just the thought makes you shudder and scrub harder, hoping to get the smell out. Historians still argue whether urine was the primary bleaching agent or more of a supplement to other natural substances like lye or ash. Either way, the idea that laundry was once a public, communal, and somewhat pungent event makes your current solo scrubbing feel almost ... civilized. You rinse the clothes in icy water because the firewood to heat more water has been rationed today, and hang them on a rope strung across the room. The dampness clings to everything, and the chill seeps into your bones. Your fingers feel like tiny blocks of ice. The laundry room isn't just about washing, though. It's also the place where clothes are mended, patched, and sometimes outright remade. The lady's needlework requires meticulous attention, and the seamstress, one of the few slightly higher-ranked servants, often snaps orders about hems and thread counts. You are lucky to be in laundry and not the sewing room, which has its own brand of hell. Tiny needles, sharp pins, and endless hours hunched over delicate fabrics. You pull out a ripped sleeve and start stitching with a dull needle and coarse thread. It's slow work, and your eyes burn from the dim candlelight. The fabric pricks your fingers repeatedly, but you bite back any complaint. Nobody cares about the servant's hands. While you stitch, you think about the clothes themselves. Wool was the standard, cheap and rough, perfect for keeping warmth in but terrible for comfort. Linen was softer and reserved for the nobility. And silk, that was a distant dream for people like you, imported from faraway lands. Silk was so rare and delicate that it was almost like wearing a tiny treasure. You tug at the torn fabric and wonder what kind of life your master's fine clothes live when they're not warm polished, folded, and stored in cedar chests. The servants might wear patches, but the nobles just buy new. Or at least, that's how the story usually goes. You pause to rub your wrist, sore from the stitching, and glance toward the door. The steward is standing there, arms crossed, looking impatient. "Make sure those shirts are ready by tomorrow morning," he says. "And don't let the lady find a stain." You swallow your urge to sigh. "Yes, sir." He leaves without another word, leaving you with the weight of impossible expectations on your shoulders. The day drags on, each hour heavier than the last. You fold damp clothes and stack them in a wooden chest, trying not to think about the lice crawling on your own scalp or the fleas hiding in the folds of your tunic. Speaking of pests, here's a fun medieval fact for you. Lice infestations were so common that some servants kept special combs, made with closely spaced teeth, just to pick through their hair every day. Those combs were considered prized possessions, tinny tools of dignity in a grim world. You wish you had one. The linen smells faintly of lavender, but that doesn't mask the ever-present mustiness. You wonder how anyone could truly feel clean living in these conditions. As twilight bleeds through the small window, you take a rare moment to glance out. The manor grounds are quiet now, save for the distant howl of a wolf. Your breath puffs out in white clouds. The cold is a constant companion here, creeping through every crack and cranny. You think back to the stable, the foal, the piles of waste you hauled earlier, and the endless chores that seem to stretch without end. Sometimes you wonder if you're caught in a loop, a never-ending circle of misery with no escape. But there's a flicker of light, one small thing that keeps you going, the knowledge that no matter how badly you're treated, you're still necessary. The manor cannot run without servants like you. The thought doesn't make the work easier, but it offers a tiny measure of comfort. You finish your tasks, dragging your weary body toward the small servants' quarters. It's cramped, dark, and smells faintly of mold and old bread. Your bed is a pile of straw covered by a threadbare blanket. You collapse onto it, the mattress crunching under your weight. As you lie there, your mind drifts to the other servants. The ones who came before you, the ones who will come after. Their faces are ghosts, their names lost to time. But their toil, their suffering, and their resilience are stitched into the very fabric of this manor. You close your eyes, the soft hum of the wind outside mixing with the faint creaks of the ancient building. Your body is exhausted, but your mind is restless. Historians still argue whether the servitude system was primarily exploitative or a necessary social structure for medieval life. The answer is complex. For you, it's painfully simple. Survival means obedience. Tomorrow will bring more chores, more grime, more cold. But for now, you cling to the rare moments of peace, the stolen breaths between duties. You fall asleep wondering if anyone outside this manor ever thinks about the nameless servants who keep their world spinning. Probably not. But that's all right, because tomorrow you'll wake and start again. Dawn creeps in like an unwelcome guest, casting pale light through the cracks in the servants' quarters. You wake with a dull ache in your bones, muscles stiff from the cold night. Your blanket, threadbare and smelling faintly of damp straw, offers little warmth. Still, it's better than the floor. You sit up, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and prepare yourself for another day in the manor. You probably won't survive this kind of life long. Your mind whispers, you're lucky, your time will be cut short by illness or injury before the soul-crushing tedium finishes you off. But here you are, moving mechanically, pulling on your rough woolen tunic and patched trousers. Your shoes, cracked and worn, feel like leather gloves soaked in water. The morning chill bites through the thin fabric. You breathe in and out, each puff a cloud of mist in the frigid air. Breakfast isn't a feast. It's a hurried bite of stale bread, some watered-down ale, and a few scraps of salted meat, if you're lucky. You eat quickly in the crowded servants' hall, where the chatter is low and conversations are mostly grumbles about yesterday's chores or who's been shifted to the worst tasks today. The lady's chambermaid arrives shortly after you finish. Her tasks will be even more exhausting, dusting finery, brushing the lady's hair, ironing rough spot for now. She wears an expression of tired determination. You exchange a brief nod. No need for words. Servants stick together silently. You trudge out into the courtyard, where frost still clings stubbornly to the stones. The manor's heavy wooden gates creak as they swing open for the day's deliveries and visitors. Today is market day, and you can hear the distant clatter of carts and merchants shouting. Your first task is to prepare the manor's storage rooms. You open creaking cupboards and wooden chests, checking the stock. Sacks of flour, barrels of salted pork, baskets of apples. You dust off cobwebs and rearrange the piles to make room for fresh supplies. This isn't glamorous, but it's vital. Without food stores, the manor grinds to a halt. As you stack a barrel of salted fish, you catch a whiff of something strange, like a faint hint of cloves and cinnamon mixed with old wood. The manor kitchen has been experimenting with exotic spices lately, thanks to the Lord's newfound interest in trade routes. A curious change, since just a few decades ago, such spices were rare luxuries reserved for nobility. You wonder if the servants will ever get a taste of these flavorful delicacies, or if they remain locked away in the Lord's private pantry. Probably not, you think. The kitchen is already bustling when you arrive to help with meal preparations. The cook barks orders, sending servants scurrying for firewood, chopping herbs, and stirring massive cauldrons filled with watery stews. Your job is to wash vegetables, a task that seems simple but requires care to avoid bruising the fragile roots. Here's a quirky tidbit. In medieval times, some cooks believed that talking while preparing food could spoil the flavor. The kitchen buzz is a low murmur of restrained voices, as if the air itself holds its breath. You try to keep quiet, but can't help a soft chuckle when a young kitchen boy nearly drops a basket of onions. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were rooted in genuine culinary practices, or were just another form of kitchen control to keep servants in line. Mid-morning, you were sent to the garden to gather fresh herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage used for both cooking and medicinal purposes. The garden is a rare patch of life in the otherwise cold, stone-dominated manor grounds. You brush your gloved fingers over the frosted leaves, the chill prickling your skin. You pause by the herb patch and think about how essential these plants are. They fight off infections, mask unpleasant smells, and even serve as rudimentary dental care. Imagine a medieval toothbrush, usually a twig chewed at one end or a cloth rubbed vigorously on teeth. The herbs probably helped freshen breath in an era where oral hygiene was, well, minimal at best. While gathering, you overhear a conversation between two older servants discussing the latest plague rumors in a nearby village. Fear is a constant companion in these times. Disease can sweep through a manor as fast and deadly as a wildfire. You try not to think about it. What good does worrying do when you have dirt to scrub and floors to clean? By midday, your back aches. Again, you carry a basket of eggs from the henhouse to the kitchen, careful not to crack a single one. A broken egg means another night of bread without sauce. The henhouse smells of feathers and dust, and the hens cluck nervously as you approach. Outside, the Lord's hunting party returns from the woods, their horses snorting and stamping in the mud. You glance up to see them unloading deer carcasses, which will be preserved in salt or smoked over fires for weeks. Game like this is a luxury, and only the Lord and his guests will feast on it. For you, the meal will be gruel, perhaps with some of the cheaper cuts of meat boiled down into a watery broth. After the hunting party passes, you're ordered to prepare the main hall for the evening's feast. This means sweeping the stone floors, polishing the wooden tables, and laying rushes fresh straw and rushes strewn across the floor to absorb odors and provide warmth underfoot. Fresh rushes smell faintly sweet, but they're tricky to lay. Too many, and the floor feels uneven. Too few, and the dirt seeps through. Laying rushes was a common medieval practice, but historians still argue whether it was more about hygiene or simply masking the reality of dirt and waste that accumulated. Over days, the Lord's cousins arrive before sunset. You glimpse them from a distance as they dismount, dressed in fine furs and silks, faces pale from the cold outside. They barely acknowledge the servants, their noses wrinkled in disdain at the rustic manner. You suppress a snort. If they think, this place is rough, they should try living here year-round. Dinner is a noisy, chaotic affair. The nobles feast on roast meats, fine bread, and fragrant stews laced with those exotic spices. Servants scurry about, refilling cups and clearing plates. You remain in the background, unnoticed but indispensable. There's an odd satisfaction in being invisible in this way, except when you're being ordered around like an unpaid pack mule. As the evening winds down, you help clear the hall. Candles gutter in the drafty room. The cousins have retired to their chambers, leaving the manor to settle back into its usual rhythm. You're sent to scrub the great hall's flagstone floor, knees scraping on cold stone. The water is icy, and your hands ache from the friction of the scrubbing brush. You pause for a moment, staring into the flickering candlelight, feeling the weight of your place in this endless machine. It's not a life of glory or comfort. It's survival grueling, thankless, and relentless. Yet somehow you persist, because that's what servants do. They endure. The morning air is sharp and unforgiving as you trudge toward the stables. The crunch of frost underfoot, the only sound besides your own wary breath. You're tasked with feeding and mucking out the animals today, a job that smells like manure, hay, and the faint metallic temps of sweat. The stables are cramped and dim, lit only by thin shafts of morning light slipping through cracks in the wooden walls. The horses shift nervously, their breath steaming in the cold. You reach out to stroke the neck of the Lord's prized destrier, its coat glossy despite the chill. The horse's warm body feels like a brief comfort in a world of cold, stone, and endless chores. Mucking out isn't glamorous. You scoop the damp, soiled straw from each stall, the stench thick and pungent enough to make your eyes water. Piles of manure grow in the corner of the yard, awaiting transport to the fields as fertilizer. It's backbreaking, stinky work, but without it, the stables would turn to rot and disease. You recall a curious medieval fact. Horseshoes were sometimes made from recycled iron scraps, including old nails and tools. Blacksmiths had to be resourceful, and a horse's health literally depended on their skill. A poorly nailed horseshoe could mean injury or death for a valuable animal as you work. You hear the stablemaster shouting orders at a younger apprentice who's dropped a bucket of water. You suppress a smile. No one escapes the constant stress here. Whether noble or servant, historians still argue whether the importance of horses in medieval society is overstated or rightly emphasized. Certainly, they were essential for travel, war, and farming, but the daily care they demanded was exhausting and often undervalued. You move on to the pigeons, next. Yes. The manor keeps a dovecote full of pigeons, prized not just for their meat, but also for their droppings, which made excellent fertilizer. You watch the birds flutter and coo, their feathers dusted with frost. Caring for the pigeons involves gathering their eggs and making sure the structure is secure from predators, like hawks or rats. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of the manors, cats lurking nearby, balancing the pest population in their own lazy way. You wonder about the strange balance between the animals and humans here. The horses, the dogs, the cats, the pigeons, they all rely on servants for survival, just as the manor depends on both creatures and people working in harmony. It's a fragile ecosystem of duty and endurance. As you finish feeding, you glance toward the fields where peasants work the Lord's land. You envy them in a way: the open sky, the sunlight, the sense of tangible progress as crops grow. Your work is endless maintenance, a cycle with no visible end. Next comes the task of gathering water from the well. You take the heavy wooden bucket, lowered slowly down the dark shaft. The water is cold and smells faintly earthy. You haul the bucket back up, muscles straining, and pour it into barrels around the manor. Water is life, but it's also a source of constant labor and worry. Without clean water, disease spreads quickly, and the Lord's family expects pristine conditions. You try not to think about the fact that many servants drink from the same well but rarely enjoy the luxury of a proper bath. Speaking of baths, here's a quirky fact to lighten your mood. Despite the image of medieval people being filthy, many actually bathed regularly, at least until the Black Death struck in the 14th century. After that, some thought bathing opened the skin to disease, so cleanliness declined. You'd never guess it, looking at your own grimy hands. By afternoon, you're sent to carry firewood inside. The manor's massive hearths consume wood like hungry beasts, and the lords expect roaring fires to chase away the damp chill. You stack logs carefully, mindful of the risk of sparks. A sudden breeze blows through the hallway, extinguishing some candles. You hurry to relight them, cursing the drafty old manor. Heat is a precious commodity here, and fireplaces offer the only relief from winter's bite. As you gather ashes from the hearths, you reflect on the fact that wood smoke indoors filled the manor's air with soot. Medieval chimneys were primitive. Often smoke escaped through simple holes or thatched roofs. Respiratory illnesses were common, especially among servants who spent most of their time close to fires. You wipe your face and hands with a rough cloth, smudging the black soot, but ignoring it. Hygiene is a luxury you can't afford. The afternoon brings the task of repairing fences and gates. The manor's grounds are enclosed by wooden palisades that keep wild animals and unwelcome visitors. Out you wield a hammer and nails, fixing loose boards, your muscles aching from the strain. A neighbor from the village stops by briefly, a gaunt man with weathered skin and cautious eyes. He asks if the Lord will be attending the upcoming fair. You shrug. News rarely filters down to the servants in detail. You learn later that the Lord's attendance at fairs is as much about showing off power as about business. The medieval social scene was a strange dance of displays, alliances, and subtle threats, a world far removed from the servant's daily grind. Evening falls, and you're assigned to light the torches and candles around the manor. The flickering flames cast tall shadows on the stone walls. You shiver, the cold creeping back as daylight fades. Dinner for the servants is a meager affair, gruel thickened with barley, a few boiled turnips, and sometimes a hunk of cheese if the cellar isn't empty. You eat quickly, trying not to think about the sumptuous feasts upstairs. You recall an odd fact. In some households, servants weren't even allowed to eat with their masters, forced instead to eat in separate rooms or at different times. This separation reinforced the strict social hierarchy that defined medieval life. After dinner, you clean the kitchen hearth and gather the scraps for the pigs in the sty. Pigs were prized for their ability to eat almost anything, turning leftovers into valuable meat and fat. You toss the scraps over the fence and watch the pigs scramble greedily. For a moment, you envy their simple hunger and contentment. Finally, you return to the servants' quarters. Your hands ache, your feet throb, and your back protests every movement. You strip off your damp clothes and crawl into bed, the straw mattress rough against your skin as you lie there. Your mind drifts again to the endless cycle. Chores, cold, hunger, exhaustion. Repeat. Historians still debate how much hope or agency servants had in their lives. Some argue they were trapped in unending servitude, while others point to moments of camaraderie, small joys, and even rebellion. You aren't sure which is true. Some days, survival feels like the only goal. Other days, you find yourself dreaming of escape, freedom, maybe even a different life. But for now, the manor holds you in its cold, unyielding grip. You close your eyes, the sound of the night wind rattling the shutters, and prepare to do it all again tomorrow. The first light of dawn slips past the heavy shutters, but you barely notice. Your sleep is shallow and restless, haunted by dreams of harder work and colder nights. When your eyes finally open, you roll out of your straw-stuffed mattress with a groan, joints stiff and protesting. The familiar chill seeps into your bones immediately, no matter how many layers you wear. This is your life, endless cycles of discomfort, labor, and fleeting moments of rest. You pull on your worn boots and threadbare tunic, then make your way silently through the darkened corridors of the manor. Your footsteps echo softly against cold stone walls, a reminder that this place was built for strength and permanence, not comfort or warmth. The servants' quarters smell faintly of smoke and sweater, scent that clings to your clothes and skin despite your best efforts. Your first chore today is the laundry. Yes, even medieval servants had to deal with the never-ending piles of dirty linen, stained clothes, and muddy boots. The Lord's family's wardrobes are filled with fine fabric silks, velvets, and embroidered wool, but for you, rough-spun linen and coarse wool are the daily standard, carrying the heavy baskets of laundry to the stream outside. You feel The cold bites your fingers through your gloves. The water is icy, clear, and merciless. Scrubbing garments by the riverbank means bending and kneeling on the muddy shore. Hands raw from cold water and harsh soaps made from animal fat and ashes. Here's a fun but strange fact. Medieval people sometimes used stale urine as a bleaching agent in laundry. Yes, really. Ammonia in urine helped whiten cloth. The thought makes you wrinkle your nose, but desperate times called for desperate measures. You can't help but wonder how many servants secretly avoided their laundry duties by feigning illness. Historians still argue whether the practice of using urine was widespread or limited to certain regions and classes. Regardless, it's an uncomfortable reminder of how resourceful and grim and evil cleanliness could be. You scrub and rinse, repeating the motions until your arms ache and the water runs cold. On your way back, you pass the gardens again. The earth is frozen solid beneath a thin layer of frost, and the few remaining vegetables cling stubbornly to life. You pause to pick some withered kale leaves for the kitchen stew. Fresh produce is rare in winter, making these meager greens a small but welcome luxury. Back inside, you hang the laundry on rough wooden poles in the servants' hall, praying for a dry day. Damp clothes in a drafty manner mean misery, and often illness. You glance around at the other servants working nearby, faces pale and weary, but they manage small smiles as they trade gossip and complaints. Lunch is a brief pause. You eat a thick slice of black bread with a smear of cheese, washed down with cold ale. The meal is simple, but you savor it all the same. There's an odd camaraderie among the servants sharing. This meager fare feels like a quiet rebellion against the harshness of your world. After lunch, you're sent to clean the latrines. Not exactly a glamorous job, but someone has to do it. The smell hits you immediately, a mix of decay, mud, and despair. You shove the muck aside with a wooden shovel, the stench clinging to your clothes and hair. The manor's waste system is rudimentary at best. Holes in the floor leading to pits below or simple cesspits outside. Flies buzz relentlessly during warmer months, spreading disease and misery. It's no surprise that sanitation problems were among the biggest killers in medieval times. Here's a quirky fact to distract you. Some medieval nobles thought that bad smells caused illness, leading to the practice of carrying around fragrant posies or smoking herbs to cleanse the air. Spoiler alert, it didn't help much. Historians still debate how much medieval people understood about disease transmission. The miasma theory, the idea that bad air caused sickness, was widespread, and it wasn't until much later that germ theory emerged. With the latrines somewhat manageable, you hurry to the kitchen to help prepare the evening meal. The cook eyes you critically, but nods when you arrive with fresh herbs and chopped vegetables. Today's menu includes pottage, a thick stew made from whatever is available: barley, root vegetables, and sometimes salted meat or fish. Cooking over an open hearth means constant vigilance. Flames lick at the blackened cauldron, sending up clouds of smoke that leave your eyes stinging. You stir the pot steadily, careful not to let the food burn. The kitchen is hot and chaotic sharp. Contrast to the biting cold outside. You glance out the small window and see the manor's children playing briefly in the courtyard. Their laughter a rare light in your dreary day. They're dressed in warm woolens, faces flushed from the cold, oblivious to the relentless toil that awaits them when they grow older. For now, they live in a bubble of innocence you remember only vaguely. As afternoon fades into evening, you're sent to help the Lord Steward with inventory. You count barrels of salted meat, sacks of grain, and bundles of firewood, marking each on a crude parchment list. The steward is a stern man, more interested in efficiency than kindness, and you feel the weight of his gaze as he watches your every move. Supply shortages are a constant worry. If the manor runs low on food or fuel, the entire household suffers. Servants talk in hushed tones about bad harvests, poor hunting seasons, or delayed shipments from distant markets. Speaking of markets, here's an intriguing detail. Some manors, engaged in early forms of trade, exchanging surplus goods or artisanal crafts with nearby villagers. You wonder if any of this commerce ever trickled down to benefit the servants, or if it stayed firmly in the hands of the lord and his merchants. Historians still debate how much economic mobility existed for servants and peasants during the medieval period. Some argue that rigid class structures left little room for change, while others point to occasional cases of upward movement through marriage or service. After the inventory, you help light the lamps and candles throughout the manor. The flickering flames create a cozy but dim glow, casting long shadows on the stone walls. You notice again the layers of soot that coat every surfacer, silent testament to the many years of fires burning within. Dinner is served, and the servants eat in a small, separate room, often late after the Lord's household has finished. The food is repetitive and simple, but you're grateful for the warmth and company. You exchange quiet stories with your fellow servants, their voices low so as not to disturb the Lord's family. Talk drifts to rumors dailies of bandits on the roads, strange happenings in the village, or the latest news from the nearby abbey. Despite the hardships, these moments of shared connection feel like small islands of humanity in an otherwise bleak existence. As night deepens, you perform your last duties, securing doors, extinguishing torches, and tidying the servants' quarters. You crawl into your straw bed, aching but oddly content for the briefest of moments. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the shutters and sending a shiver through the manor. You pull the thin blanket tighter, bracing yourself for another cold night. But, for now, sleep calls, and for a few precious hours, the misery fades. Dawn has barely cracked when the bells toll, pulling you from whatever fitful sleep you managed. You groan softly, rubbing your eyes, but there's no option to linger. The day demands you rise and meet it head-on, as relentless as the biting wind sneaking through cracks in the stone walls. Today's task, assisting in the manor's kitchen garden, a place both vital and unkind. You step outside into the cold morning air, the breath of frost shimmering over the dirt beds. The garden looks forlorn this time of year, frozen soil cracked in places, root vegetables stubbornly clinging to life beneath the surface. Medieval manor gardens were a mix of utility and charm, where herbs and vegetables grew alongside flowers. But the gardeners, mostly peasants or servants, did all the grueling work, digging, planting, and harvesting with primitive tools as you stoop to inspect the wilted kale and late-season onions. A curious fact pops into your head. Medieval peasants often planted companion plants, flowers that helped repel pests near vegetables. Marigolds and nasturtiums weren't just pretty. They were early natural pesticides, though whether they were really effective is still debated by historians. You brush your hands across the rough leaves, cold and brittle. The sun is weak, barely penetrating the low-hanging clouds, and you feel a dull ache in your back. Digging and weeding in frozen ground is less than ideal, but the manor needs its food to survive the winter months. Nearby, a few chickens peck. Around the garden's edge, scratching for whatever bits of grain or insects they can find. Their feathers ruffle in the chill wind. Chickens were an essential part of manor life, not only for eggs and meat, but also for their ability to control insects and pests. One chicken crosses your path, and you almost trip over it. You mutter a sleepy curse, wondering why animals are always in the way when you're trying to be efficient. The chicken clucks innocently, as if mocking your exhaustion. Historians still argue whether medieval gardens were primarily practical food sources, or if they also served as spaces of leisure and beauty for the nobility. Certainly, the lords enjoyed strolling through flower beds and trimmed hedges, but for you, the garden is a relentless labor zone. After a few hours of digging and harvesting, you carry baskets of root vegetables to the kitchen. The cook eyes your haul, nodding approval at the turnips, carrots, and parsnips. Fresh vegetables are a luxury during the cold months, especially when stored root crops begin to dwindle. You overhear a servant mention the upcoming feast day, a rare event when the manor throws a celebration with music, dancing, and, most importantly, better food. The idea of a feast seems like a dream-rich meat, sweet pies, fresh bread, all the things you rarely taste. But you quickly push the thought aside. Feasts are a world apart, reserved for the lords and their guests. Your place is in the shadows, toiling unseen. The garden work finished, you are assigned to gather eggs from the hen. The smell of straw, feathers, and chicken droppings hits you immediately. You tiptoe carefully among the clucking hens, trying not to ruffle their feathers. Eggs are precious, often rationed strictly. Here's a quirky fact. Some medieval people believed that eating eggs laid on certain days, like those laid on Good Friday, held special magical properties. Superstition was deeply woven into daily life, shaping even the simplest acts. You collect the eggs in a woven basket, careful not to crack any. The fragile shells feel cool and smooth in your palm. A small but important contribution to the manor's food supply. Next, you help with firewood delivery. A cart creaks up the lane, piled high with logs harvested from nearby woods. The woodsmen, burly men with soot-blackened faces, grunt as they unload. You assist by stacking the wood neatly in the manor's storage, the smell of pine and oak filling. The air. Wood is life during medieval winters. Without a steady supply, the manor would freeze, and the kitchens couldn't cook. Fires burn constantly here, smoke curling through ancient chimneys. The task is exhausting, but vital. You recall that some lords maintained special woodlots for fuel, carefully managed forests set aside to supply the manor. It's an early form of conservation, though mostly motivated by necessity. Historians still debate how sustainable medieval forestry practices really were. Some argue that rampant woodcutting led to deforestation, while others point to evidence of careful resource management. As midday approaches, you're sent to help in the bakery. The smell of fresh bread is almost intoxicating. The baker, a gruff but kind man, kneads dough with practiced hands, sending clouds of flour into the chilly air. Bread was the staple of every meal, but quality varied widely. The lord's table often featured white bread made from finely sifted wheat flour, symbol of wealth and status, while servants like you ate coarse brown bread made from rye or barley. Here's a historical tidbit. In some medieval towns, bread was so important that it was heavily regulated. Bakers who cheated customers by mixing poor flour or underbaking faced harsh punishments. Bread was literally the foundation of life. You help shape loaves and load them into the huge stone oven. the heat radiating against your cold fingers. The oven's mouth gapes open like a hungry beast, consuming logs and spitting out warm bread, while the dough rises. You steal a moment to wipe sweat from your brow and watch the sky through the small bakery window. Snowflakes begin to fall softly, dusting the earth in white. The cold seems endless. After the bread is baked and packed away, you return to the kitchens to assist with food preparation for the evening meal. Chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and fetching firewood keep you busy. You catch snippets of conversation. Among the kitchen staff gossip about nearby villagers, news from the market, and whispered rumors about a recent bandit attack on a trade route. Life beyond the manor's walls is a patchwork of danger and uncertainty. Despite the cold and drudgery, the kitchen buzzes with quiet energy. The camaraderie among servants is a lifeline, small moments of laughter and shared struggle. Before the day ends, you're tasked with sweeping the great hall. The stone floor is cold and unforgiving, dust and straw scattered in every corner. You work steadily, broom scraping against the stones, muscles tired but mind alert. The great hall is the heart of the manor, a place of gatherings, feasts, and ceremonies. You glance around at the heavy wooden tables, tapestries faded by time, and suits of armor standing silent watch. It's a world apart from your own life, steeped in power and tradition. You think about the lord and lady who will dine and drink here tonight, while you and the other servants eat scraps elsewhere. The divide between classes feels as wide as the moat surrounding the manor. Historians still debate how rigid medieval social hierarchies truly were. Some argue that upward mobility was nearly impossible, while others highlight rare stories of servants who gained favor or wealth. As dusk falls, you carry torches to light the manor's corridors. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on ancient stone, a reminder of the passage of countless winters. You retire to your quarters, body aching, mind weary but strangely satisfied. Another day survived in a world that never softens, never slows. You pull your thin blanket tight and close your eyes. The distant howl of wolves echoing through the cold night. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, bringing new tasks, new challenges, and the unyielding grind of the medieval servants. Life. Morning light seeps in through the tiny window of your cramped quarters, painting long shadows on the cold stone floor. You wake with a stiff neck and sore limbs, the memory of yesterday's labor still clinging to your muscles. Today promises no reprieve. The Lord's manor demands endless attention, and you're right at the center of it. Whether you like it or not, the first task of the day lands on you with little warning: laundry. You trudge toward the manor's wash house, where a pungent mix of soap-wet ashes and sweat greets you like an old enemy. The chore is worse than you imagined when you signed up for servitude. Heavy linen sheets and woolen garments must be scrubbed, clean, wrung out, and hung to dry, often in damp, chilly conditions that make your fingers ache. Washing clothes in medieval times was an ordeal far from the luxury of modern machines. People relied on rough scrubbing with natural soaps often made from wood, ash, and animal fat, then rinsed clothes in cold water. The poor didn't have the luxury of hot water heated by a stove. Instead, they had to make do with whatever they could manage. You remember hearing a quirky fact: medieval laundresses sometimes used stale urine to whiten clothes. The ammonia in urine acted as a bleaching agent. It sounds disgusting now, but back then it was a common and effective method. Needless to say, The smell in the washhouse was a potent mix of everything unpleasant. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread across Europe or just localized in certain regions. Some suggest it was mainly a desperate measure during harsh winters when fresh resources were scarce. As you scrub, your thoughts drift to the Lord's family, who wear fine, freshly laundered clothes daily, their fabrics smooth and unblemished. You suspect they never see the sweat and stink that go into preparing their wardrobes. Next, you move to mending clothes, a job requiring sharp eyes and nimble fingers. Tears and worn spots are everywhere, evidence of the endless cycle of wear and repair in a world without fast fashion or ready replacements. You thread a needle carefully and begin stitching a torn sleeve. Your hands move steadily, though your mind wanders to the endless pile of damaged garments waiting for attention. An interesting tidbit comes to mind. Some medieval servants were skilled enough to embroider intricate patterns on their lords' clothing, turning simple repairs into art. Such talents were rare and could earn a servant favor or small rewards. But for most, sewing was purely about survival and utility. The hours pass in a blur of needle and thread, punctuated by the occasional barking dog or distant clatter of carts. The manor's bustle never ceases, a constant hum beneath your concentration. After the laundry, you're sent to assist in the storerooms, checking and inventorying supplies. The smell of dried herbs, salted meats, and aged cheeses fills the air, mingling with the dust motes floating lazily in the dim light. Storerooms were critical to a manor's survival, especially through brutal winters when fresh food was scarce. Barrels of salted pork, herring, and grains had to be monitored and rotated carefully to prevent spoilage. You handle bags of grain, hefting them onto shelves with a grunt. One barrel leaks a little, and you sniff the sour odor suspiciously. Mold and rot were constant threats, especially when humidity and temperature fluctuated. Here's a fun historical note. Some manor lords kept bees in special hives within their estates, harvesting honey not just as sweetener but also as medicine, and wax for candles. Honey was a precious commodity, and its production carefully guarded. You pause for a moment, savoring the faintly sweet aroma of a nearby honey jar, a rare luxury compared to your usual coarse diet. Historians still debate how much access common servants had to such treats. While honey and spices adorned noble tables, servants' meals were often bland and repetitive, relying heavily on potager, thick stew of grains and vegetables. The midday sun filters weakly through narrow windows, casting long beams that seem to slow time itself. You move on to cleaning the stables, a task no one looks forward to, but that must be done. The smell hits you immediately, a potent mix of hay, manure, and sweat. You roll up your sleeves and grab the pitchfork, ready to muck out the stalls. Horses were invaluable to a manor, used for transportation, farming, and warfare. Their care was paramount, and neglect meant disaster. As you shovel a horse, your shoulder, its warm breath, a small comfort in the cold. You run a hand along its neck, appreciating the animal's strength and grace. Here's an odd fact. Medieval people sometimes believed horses could sense danger long before humans, and they were often considered semi-magical creatures. Some knights' horses even had names that reflected valor or strength, almost like partners in battle. Historians still argue how much animals influenced medieval superstition and daily decision-making, but their practical importance is undeniable. Finished with the stables, you wash your hands in a basin of cold water, the chill biting at your skin. The day's work seems endless, and your body is starting to protest by afternoon. Your next task is to assist in the Great Hall's preparation for the evening meal. You carry firewood, arrange benches, and polish the heavy wooden tables until they gleam faintly in the dim candlelight. The Great Hall, with its high vaulted ceilings and tapestries, feels cold and impersonal, yet it's the center of manor life. Lords and ladies will dine here in warmth and comfort, while you and your fellow servants remain unseen in the shadows. You overhear snippets of conversation among the household. Staff gossip about a traveling peddler, whispers of an upcoming wedding in the village, and rumors of an outbreak of the dreaded plague. It's a reminder that even within these thick stone walls, the wider world's dangers and mysteries are never far away. You recall a mainstream historical fact: the medieval plague, or Black Death, devastated Europe in the 14th century, wiping out nearly half the population in some regions. Its arrival reshaped society in profound ways, affecting labor, land ownership, and even attitudes toward death. Your own precarious position as a servant places you at risk not only from disease, but from the harsh conditions and relentless work that wears down the body. As evening approaches, you help serve the meal. The Lord's table is laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, and spiced wine. Servants eat separately, often the cold leftovers or simple stews. You manage a small portion of bread and pottage, chewing thoughtfully. Hunger is a constant companion, but you're used to it now. A quirky fact: some medieval servants carried Lucky Charms, small tokens or herbs, believed to ward off evil or bring protection. These personal talismans offered a sliver of comfort in a harsh world. You finger a worn wooden bead you keep hidden in your pocket, a reminder that even in misery, hope lingers. The day winds down with more cleaning, candle snuffing, and finally a moment to sit quietly. Fatigue weighs heavy, but your thoughts remain restless. You wonder what tomorrow will bring in this endless cycle of toil and survival. Historians still debate how much agency and individuality servants truly had. Some argue they were little more than property, while others highlight stories of resistance, subtle rebellion, and even moments of joy. You lay down once more, the chill seeping into your bones, and close your eyes against the long night. You wake again to the muted crow of a rooster, though it feels like your bones never fully rested. The cold air bites through the thin woolen blanket, and your fingers numb before you can even pull yourself out of bed. Today is no different. Really accept that the manor's lord has a special guest arriving, and the entire household buzzes with quiet tension. You know this means your workload will triple, and your already miserable existence will be stretched thinner than the tattered shoes on your feet. Before you step outside, you take a moment to listen to the clatter of preparations all around. Servants scurry like ants beneath the polished armor and embroidered banners. The kitchen's fiery heart roars louder, and the scent of roasting meat drifts down the cold stone corridors. The lords and ladies expect their visitors to be dazzled, and that means every servant must sweat blood to keep up appearances. Your first job this morning is to help clean the guest chambers. The room is surprisingly large, with thick tapestries and heavy furniture and almost alien luxury compared to your own cramped quarters. You carefully dust the carved oak bedpost and smooth the linen sheets, but your rough hands and coarse sleeves scratch the delicate fabric. You curse silently, but keep working. One small mistake here could bring a sharp rebuke. A fascinating tidbit floats through your thoughts. In medieval Europe, guest chambers were often left empty for months or even years, reserved for noble visitors who might or might not ever show up. The upkeep was costly, but hospitality was a sacred duty for the Lord, a matter of honor and reputation. Historians still argue whether this lavish hospitality was genuinely motivated by kindness or was just a rigid social requirement to display power and status. Either way, the servants bore the brunt of the effort. After finishing with the guest room, you are dispatched to assist in the kitchen, where the chaos is nearly unbearable. The cooks bark orders, flames leap dangerously high, and pots clang like thunder. You carry baskets of fresh vegetables and trudge back and forth, your feet aching with every step. One of the cooks throws you a look that says, "Don't mess this up," reminding you of how fragile your position really is. The kitchen is a world of smells, herbs, roasting meats, burned bread, and the faintest hint of something sweet, perhaps honey or dried fruit. You pinch your nose as a pot threatens to boil over, then whisk it away before disaster strikes. You wonder how medieval kitchens functioned without modern sanitation. The reality was grim. Rats scurried beneath the tables, and the same knives that carved meat often sliced vegetables. Yet, somehow, food was prepared well enough to feed 100 people at a time. Here's a quirky fact. To help keep rats and mice at bay, some kitchens kept ferrets or cats around. Ferrets were trained to hunt rodents, while cats were prized for their keen hunting skills. You'd love to see a ferret chase down a rat, but in your world, that's a luxury. Historians still debate whether ferrets were commonly used in manor kitchens or were more typical of rural farms. Either way, the pest problem was real, and no servant was immune to the grime of it all. Once the food is ready, your task shifts to setting the great hall for the grand feast. You arrange heavy wooden benches and cover tables with rough linen cloths. The tableware is simple wooden platters, ceramic bowls, and pewter goblets, but to you, it gleams with importance. As the guests arrive, you step back, your body aching and your spirit low, but your face neutral. The Lord's guest is a wealthy merchant from a distant town, whose goods and alliances might mean fortune or ruin. You overhear snippets of conversation, of wool prices, land disputes, and rumors of a war brewing in the north. The political world outside the manor feels distant but dangerous, like a shadow creeping closer. Remember that strange custom you once heard about. Lords sometimes held trial by combat to resolve disputes, sending knights to fight on their behalf rather than relying on words. It sounds like something from a storybook, but it was a very real, brutal part of medieval justice. Historians still argue how often trial by combat was actually used versus legal negotiations. The reality likely shifted with time and place. During the feast, you watch from a discreet corner as the lords and their guests enjoy roast boar, fresh bread, and spiced wine. The servants carry platters in and out, barely pausing to breathe. You manage to sneak a crust of bread when no one is looking. Servants' meals during such occasions were meager, a far cry from the rich food served above. Sometimes you wonder if the nobles ever consider the sacrifices behind their comfort. After the meal, your final task is clearing the hall, a laborious job that stretches late into the night. You scrape scraps from the tables, sweep floors sticky with spilled wine, and stack the heavy chairs. Your back protests with every movement, and your hands are raw. The Lord's guest retires to his chambers, likely to enjoy a warm bath and soft bed. You, on the other hand, return to your freezing room, shoulders hunched against the cold. You catch yourself daydreaming about a life beyond the manor, where you might eat warm meals without fear of rebuke or exhaustion. But those dreams always feel distant, like a far-off light flickering in the dark. A surprising historical fact. Some medieval servants managed to save money over years of hard labor and eventually bought their own land or set up small businesses. It wasn't common, but it was possible. Historians still debate how widespread this social mobility really was. Was it an exception or a hidden reality for many? As you finally settle down, your thoughts drift toward the next day's tasks. The special guest has departed, but the work never ends. Your life as a servant is a constant cycle of toil, frustration, and tiny moments of quiet hope. And somehow, despite it all, you endure. The dawn arrives with a heavy fog, curling its cold fingers around the manor's stone walls. You pull your threadbare cloak tighter and brace yourself for another day, knowing you'll be drenched in sweat or shivering by nightfalls, sometimes both. Today's task, the fields. Yes, after days of indoor drudgery, you're sent outside to toil under the unforgiving sky, mucking about in the mud and dirt like an animal. You trudge past the fields, where the soil is hard and cracked from a long, dry spell. The air smells faintly of earth and decay, mixed with the distant odor of manure from the livestock pens. Your fingers grip the handle of a crude wooden plow, and your knees ache as you bend over to start the back-breaking working. The fields was one of the most dreaded tasks for servants and peasants alike. Medieval agriculture was labor-intensive and inefficient by modern standards. The heavy plough-thon made of wood and iron was dragged through the soil by oxen, and it required constant human effort to guide and manage the beasts. Here's a fun, if grim, historical tidbit. The medieval calendar was punctuated by feast days and holy days when peasants and servants could rest. But these breaks were often so short and so few that the fields still demanded near constant labor during growing seasons. Miss a single day and the crops might suffer. Historians still debate how effective medieval farming methods truly were. Some argue the productivity was surprisingly resilient, while others point to chronic food shortages and famines as evidence of inefficiency. You wipe the sweat from your brow and glance at the oxen, massive beasts that grunt and pull with slow determination. Sometimes you imagine swapping places with them burdened, sure, but at least uncomp LAINING. But mid-morning brings a sudden downpour, soaking you to the bone. The mud turns treacherous, and your boots sink with every step. You stumble, nearly into the sloppy earth, but manage to catch yourself with a grunt. Your clothes cling to your skin, heavy and cold. A curious fact floats through your mind. Medieval peasants and servants rarely had waterproof clothing. They made do with wool, which absorbs water but retains warmth better than linen or hemp. Still, wet wool was heavy and uncomfortable, and illnesses often followed long exposure to dampness. You wonder how many colds, fevers, and worse were caused simply by being soaked and forced to continue working. The manners heal as if you could call them that had few remedies beyond herbal infusions and prayers by midday. The rain slows to a drizzle, but the fields remain sodden. Your back aches and your hands blister against the rough plough handle. Your stomach rumbles a dull, persistent reminder that your meals are small and infrequent. You think of the Lord's table again, laden with rich meats and fresh bread, while you scrape together whatever scraps remain in the kitchen or scavenge root vegetables from the garden. A quirky fact to lighten the mood: some servants would try to borrow small items, eggs, scraps of cheese, or a piece of meat to supplement their meals. Getting caught meant harsh punishment. but hunger drove many to desperate measures. Historians still argue about the extent of theft and pilfering among servants. Was it widespread survival instinct or rare acts of rebellion? As afternoon fades, your focus shifts to the manor's vegetable garden, where herbs, onions, and cabbages grow in uneven rows. You help weed the beds, pulling out stubborn roots and tossing them into a growing pile. Gardening was an essential part of medieval life, providing vital nutrition and medicine. The herb garden, in particular, was a treasure trove of remedies. For common ailments, lavender for calming nerves, rosemary for memory, and sage for sore throats. You remember a story told by an older servant about a secret remedy involving crushed garlic and honey, said to ward off the plague. Of course, it was probably just superstition, but you hold on to it anyway. After your back-breaking work in the fields and garden, you are sent to fetch water from the manor's well, a task that sounds simple but quickly proves exhausting. The well sits a few hundred yards away, and the bucket is heavy and unwieldy. You carefully lower the bucket, feeling the cool splash as it fills. The water is dark and smells faintly of earth and minerals. You pull the bucket up slowly, muscles straining. M-A-I-N-S-T-R-E-A-M. Historical fact. Medieval wells were vital for manor survival, but contamination was a constant threat. Many wells were shallow and easily polluted by runoff or nearby latrines, contributing to disease outbreaks. You think about the long journey this water takes, from well to kitchen to cleaning to your own parched throat. It's a reminder of how fragile life is when something as basic as water is a precious resource. Returning to the manor, you spill a bit of the water, muttering curses under your breath. The other servants barely notice. Everyone is too busy with their own endless chores. Evening falls, and the sky darkens with ominous clouds. You hope for rain to water the crops, but your soaked clothes and muddy boots are a miserable reminder of nature's unpredictability as night approaches. You're tasked with tending the manor's livestock, a handful of chickens, a few goats, and a stubborn old pig. You scatter, feed, close the henhouse doors, and check for strays. Animals were crucial to medieval manors, providing meat, milk, wool, and labor. Their care was demanding, and neglect meant loss of vital resources. You remember reading that some servants formed close bonds with certain animals, offering small comforts in a harsh world. The old pig, grunting happily as it munches on scraps, feels like an unlikely friend. Historians still debate how much emotional connection medieval servants had with animals. Was it mere practicality, or did genuine affection bloom amid the dirt and toil? Finally, your last job is to prepare the manor's hearth for the night. You gather wood from a small stack, stacking logs carefully to keep the fire alive until morning. The warmth is a small comfort against the creeping chill. You sit for a moment, exhausted and sore, watching the flames flicker. Your thoughts wander to the future, the chance, however small, that one day your life might be better. A quirky fact drifts into your mind. Some medieval servants believed that embers held the spirit of the hearth itself, protecting the household from evil. To let the fire die completely was to invite misfortune. You smile faintly, feeling the fire's heat on your face as you close your eyes. Historians still argue how much superstition influenced daily routines. Whether true or not, these beliefs shaped lives in ways both subtle and profound. As you finally climb into your narrow bed, the aches and exhaustion pull you into sleep. Brief and fitful, tomorrow the fields will call again. The morning sun barely peeks through the thick, grey clouds as you rise from your lumpy straw mattress. The chill in your bones has settled like an old friend, never quite leaving. Today, your hands are destined for the stables. The scent of hay and manure hits you the moment you step inside, a pungent but oddly comforting aroma that clings to everything. Your fingers grasp the coarse ropes and bridle leather, worn from years of use and neglect. Caring for horses is a mixed blessing. On one hand, horses are noble creatures, powerful and proud. On the other, they're stubborn, messy, and prone to kicking when least expected. You scrape down their flanks, working up a sweat despite the cold air, brushing dirt and sweat from their shiny coats. A mainstream fact: horses in medieval manors were invaluable, not just for travel, but for ploughing fields and hauling goods. Their upkeep was costly, requiring oats, hay, and constant grooming. But here's a quirky detail. Some servants believed that whispering softly to horses could calm them, even encouraging them to obey better. Whether this was early horse whispering or simple superstition, it's charming to think of these rough laborers trying to sweet-talk massive animals. Historians still debate how much training horses received in medieval manors. Were they pampered, beasts of war, or just beasts of burden? Likely, the truth lies somewhere in between, varying by region and wealth. As you muck out the stalls, shoveling piles of manure into a wheelbarrow, the smell nearly makes you gag. The work is endless: clean a stall today, repeat tomorrow. The manure is carted off to fertilize the fields. Closing the circle of medieval farm life, your hands ache from the rough work, and the smell clings to your clothes despite the chilly wind blowing through the barn doors. You think about how horses must have been some of the few animals to receive consistent care compared to other livestock. The manor's lord prided himself on his stable, boasting of prized steeds and fine harnesses. The pride didn't extend much to the servants, though. Mid-morning, you're sent to fetch fresh water for the horses. The bucket is heavy, and your arms ache as you haul it back. You pour the water into troughs, careful not to spill a drop. The horses lap eagerly, nostrils flaring, a funny yet grim fact. Horses sometimes got colic or other ailments that could kill them quickly, and without modern veterinary care, death was common. Your constant cleaning and feeding helped keep them alive. But you know it's a daily battle. Historians still argue about how much knowledge medieval servants had about animal health. Was it passed down orally or learned through harsh trial and error? By midday, you're called to assist with the lord's prized charger, an imposing black stallion with eyes as sharp as daggers. Grooming this horse feels like preparing a royal guest. You brush meticulously, polishing the silver bits on the bridle until they gleam. As you work, the lord's steward watches, making sure you don't miss a spot. One slip, and it's a hard word, or worse. Your thoughts wander to the stable. Hands you've met, some older, some barely teenagers, all sharing this exhausting routine. A life bound to the beasts, dirty and tough. Here's a curious historical tidbit. Some medieval servants believed that certain herbs sprinkled in the stable could keep horses healthy and even ward off evil spirits. Lavender, thyme, and rosemary were favorites. Historians still debate whether these herbal practices had real medicinal benefits, or were purely superstitious rituals. After feeding and cleaning, you were sent to help the blacksmith with shoeing duties. The smith is a loud, gruff man whose face is smeared with soot and sweat. You hold the horse's legs steady as he hammers hot iron. bending and shaping horseshoes. The heat from the forge is intense, a welcome contrast to the chill outside. The rhythmic pounding of hammer on anvil is almost hypnotic. Here's a fact: horseshoes were essential in medieval Europe to protect animals' hooves on rough terrain, and blacksmithing was a highly skilled trade. You try to stay out of the way, but find yourself fascinated by the process. The smell of hot metal, the sparks flying, it's a small moment of wonder in a hard day. The blacksmith grunts approval at your steadiness. You secretly feel a small burst of pride. Historians still argue how widespread horseshoeing was in rural versus urban areas. Some believe it was mostly a noble luxury. Others say it was common enough. As afternoon wanes, you assist in cleaning riding gear, wiping down leather saddles and reins. Your fingers stiffen from the cold and hard work. The manor's equestrian gear is surprisingly elaborate, embroidered with family crests and patterns. You remember overhearing a tale of a servant who secretly practiced riding at night, dreaming of escape and freedom. Riding wasn't just a job, it was a ticket to a different life, or at least a brief taste of it. You wonder if you'll ever ride freely without a master's reins guiding you. A quirky fact: in some places, servants were forbidden from riding the Lord's horses except for work, to prevent theft or escape. This rule kept many dreamers grounded. Historians still debate how often servants defied these restrictions. Tales of runaway servants abound, but the true frequency remains unclear. As twilight descends, you feed the animals once more, ensuring the stables are secure against prowling wolves or thieves. The manor sits in a wild land where danger lingers beyond the walls. You shiver, pulling your cloak tighter, and think about the loneliness of this life, days spent with animals, nights in cold rooms. Your body aches in familiar ways, sore, knees stiffed, but your mind races with thoughts of freedom and rest. You finish the day with a last sweep of the stable floor, the dust swirling in the fading light. The horses settle, nostrils flaring steam into the cold air as you close the stable doors. The silence of night wraps around you, thick and heavy. You trudge back to your quarters, mud squelching in your boots, the smell of hay and sweat lingering. Tomorrow, the work begins again, but tonight, you rest briefly, and with dreams of a life beyond the stalls. The next morning greets you with a bone-chilling wind that whistles through the cracks in the manor's stone walls. You pull your thin woolen tunic tighter, knowing it offers little real protection. Today, your duties lie in the kitchen, the heart of the household, yet ironically, one of the most grueling and unforgiving places to work. The kitchen is a hive of relentless activity. The air is thick with smoke, and the sharp temps of burning wood mingled with the aroma of stewing meat and herbs. You slip between towering cauldrons and open hearths, dodging fellow servants carrying heavy pots and baskets of food. The floor beneath your feet is slick with grease and spills, making each step a careful negotiation. Cooking in medieval times was a complex and demanding art, dictated by seasonal availability and social hierarchy. The lord's family enjoyed lavish meals, often including multiple courses and exotic spices imported from distant lands. Meanwhile, servants scurried to prepare these dishes using primitive tools and open fires. Here's a mainstream fact: medieval kitchens often had no chimneys, so smoke from fires filled the rooms and sometimes the rest of the manor. The kitchen was among the few places where fire hazards were a constant threat. You carefully tend the fire, adding logs to keep the flames roaring hot enough to cook the thick stews and freshly baked bread. The kitchen smells smoky and earthy, mixed with the sharpness of herbs like sage and thyme. A quirky detail drifts through your mind. Some medieval cooks believed that singing while stirring a pot improved the flavor, though whether this was superstition or just a way to pass time remains unclear. Historians still debate how much medieval cooks influenced meal preparation, beyond following strict recipes dictated by the Lord's preferences and available resources. Your hands are raw from constant washing and handling rough wooden spoons and heavy pots. You chop vegetables, onions, leeks, and root vegetables' eyes, stinging from the fumes. The chopping board is rough and worn, as though it's been used for 100 years. You glance at the kitchen's solitary window, fogged and grimy. Outside, the courtyard buzzes with activity, but inside, the kitchen is a microcosm of chaos and order combined. Your mind drifts to the food itself. Though the Lord's table features plenty of meat and rich pies, servants subsist mostly on gruel, watery porridge of barley or oats and scraps. Sometimes, the kitchen scraps you can scavenge make all the difference between hunger and starvation. A grim fact, malnutrition was rampant among servants, leading to susceptibility to diseases like scurvy and tuberculosis. The imbalance of nutrition was a daily challenge. The head cook, a stern woman with little patience for mistakes, barks orders. You scramble to keep up, feeling the burn in your legs and the sweat on your back. Midway through the day, you were tasked with fetching fresh eggs from the manor's chicken coop. The coop is a small, cramped space filled with noisy hens, clucking and scratching. You collect eggs carefully, trying not to wake the suspicious rooster guarding them. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval chickens were smaller and less productive than modern breeds, so eggs were precious commodities, often reserved for the lord's table or special occasions. Historians still argue how widespread chicken keeping was among different classes. While many manors had them, the number of birds and their quality varied greatly. You return to the kitchen and help crack eggs into a large bowl, mixing them with flour and milk to prepare a simple cake for the Lord's children. The batter feels sticky and lumpy in your fingers. As the oven bakes, the kitchen fills with a faintly sweet aroma. It's a rare treat. Cakes were luxury items and not everyday fare. You steal a small bite of the warm, slightly burnt crust when no one is looking, savoring the unexpected sweetness. Your thoughts drift to the servants, who have been here longer than you old hands, who can expertly manage fires and prepare feasts with a wink and a smile. Their knowledge is a treasure trove, passed down through whispers and trial. A curious fact, medieval kitchens often had rats and mice, which shared the food stores. Servants sometimes kept cats specifically to control these pests. A living weapon in the battle for scarce resources, historians still debate how big a problem vermin were in castles and manors. Some say they were barely tolerated. Others suggest infestations could devastate food supplies. As afternoon fades, you carry heavy baskets of dishes to be washed outside by the servants' quarters. The water is cold and the soap rough, making your hands ache. You scrub pots and pans, trying to remove stubborn soot and grease. The work is endless. Just as one pile is clean, another appears. You think about how servants' hands were permanently marked by their labors, calloused, cracked, and stained. Your mind wanders to the concept of invisible labor, all the effort that keeps the manor running, but remains unseen by the Lord and his guests. Dinner preparation begins in earnest, and the kitchen buzzes with renewed energy. You help carve meat, portion pies, and set trays for delivery. The kitchen's rhythm is frantic but focused, a dance you've learned to follow. A light joke flickers. If only the Lord's table would send leftovers to the servants. Life might be easier, though I doubt the lords would part with their precious venison. The evening meal is served, and you catch a glimpse of the Lord's family enjoying their food in the grand hall. The flickering candlelight and ornate tapestries make the room look like a world away from your smoky kitchen. You swallow a sigh and return to your tasks, knowing you'll eat whatever scraps are left. If any dot as the night deepens, you clean up, extinguish fires, and prepare the kitchen for another day. Your body is exhausted, your spirit a little dulled, but you find solace in small routines. A final quirky note: some medieval servants kept secret treats hidden in pockets, nuts, dried fruit, or even a sliver of cheeses, little comforts. In a tough life, historians still debate the extent to which servants indulged in such small rebellions against their circumstances. Was it a form of resistance or mere survival instinct? You finally climb into bed, stomach grumbling but heart a little lighter, lulled by the distant sounds of the manor settling for the night. Tomorrow promises more smoke, sweat, and endless chopping. The chill of dawn seeps through the cracks as you wake again, muscles aching from yesterday's endless toil. Today, your duties pull you outdoors to the fields where the real backbone of the manor's survival lies. The open air greets you, with damp earth and the scent of morning dew mingled with manure. It's a harsh awakening, but familiar. You trudge to the fields, your boots sinking slightly in the soft soil. The sky above is a dull grey, promising rain or at least a damp day. The fields stretch out before you, rows of cabbages, carrots, and grains wavering slightly in the breeze. Working the fields is brutal. The sun beats down in summer, the cold bites in winter. The work demands stamina and resilience. You bend to till, plant, and harvest, your hands blistered and stained with dirt. The Lord's survival depends on the harvest, but you reap little of its bounty yourself. A historical fact: medieval agriculture relied heavily on the three-field system, one field planted with winter crops, one with summer crops, and one left fallow to recover. This rotation was essential for maintaining soil fertility. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow and watch a crow caw overhead. It reminds you of a strange belief you once heard, that crows were the eyes of witches, spying on peasants and servants alike. Historians still argue how seriously such superstitions were taken. Were they mere stories to explain bad luck, or did they genuinely influence daily behavior? Your back protests with every bend and rise. The wooden handle of your hoe is rough and splintered. A fellow servant, older and stooped, passes by, offering a brief nod. There's little time for conversation. In the fields only the steady rhythm of work. The crops are surprisingly fragile. One unexpected frost, too much rain, or a pest invasion could mean starvation. You've seen fields ruined by locusts and blights that swept through the region like a curse. A quirky detail: medieval farmers often planted companion plants, like garlic or marigolds, near crops to ward off pests, a kind of primitive organic pest control. Historians still debate how effective these methods were, or whether they were hopeful tradition more than science. As you dig trenches for irrigation, your thoughts drift to the manor's livestock. While horses and oxen are prized, the pigs, sheep, and chickens you tend also require care. They provide meat, wool, and eggs, the staples of survival. You remember the time a pig escaped its pen and caused chaos in the kitchen. much to the dismay of the head cook. The story is a favorite among servants, a rare moment of humor in an otherwise grueling life. Farming is a constant battle against nature. Rain comes when you least want it, droughts parch the earth, and soil wears thin after years of use. You think about how medieval servants like yourself were, tied to the land in a way few today can imagine. Your livelihood, your life, depended on seasons and soil, a grim fact. Famine was a frequent visitor in medieval Europe, striking at least once a generation, wiping out thousands and leaving the weak to perish. You pause at the edge of the field, staring at a distant forest line. It's rumored to be home to bandits and worse, reminding you that danger lurks beyond the cultivated land. The Lord's men patrol the edges, but you know many servants harbor a quiet fear of venturing too far. Wild animals like wolves are also a threat, especially at night. A curious note: some servants carried charms or small tokens to protect against evil, usually given by a village-wise woman or passed down by family. Historians still argue how much medieval superstition influenced everyday safety practices versus practical measures like weapons or patrols. By midday, your hands are cracked and bleeding from the soil and tools. Your clothes are stained and heavy with sweat. Yet you carry on because the crops won't wait, and neither will the Lord. You break for a meager lunch, black bread and cheese, shared quietly with fellow workers under a gnarled old tree. The bread is hard and stale, but a moment's respite. Share stories, some true, some exaggerated, of past harvests, escaped animals, and the Lord's eccentric habits. It's these brief moments that remind you you're not alone. The afternoon brings more digging and planting. You notice a small cluster of wildflowers blooming near the fence, their delicate petals a splash of color in the muddy field. It strikes you how nature persists, even amid hardship. You think about the contrast between this wild beauty and the harshness of your life, how the two exist side by side, like light and shadow. A lighter joke crosses your mind. If only the Lord could plant a bit of kindness alongside his crops, maybe the harvest would be better. As evening approaches, you return to the manor, weary but fulfilled in a strange way. The land has been tended, the crops planted, the manor's future secured, at least for another season. Your hands tremble as you wash off the day's grime in the cold stream nearby. The water is icy but refreshing. It clears your mind and soothes your aching muscles. You think about the next day and the endless cycle ahead, fields to tend, animals to care for, meals to prepare. But for now, the sun sets in a golden blaze, and you breathe deeply, savoring the rare peace. One last curious fact: medieval peasants often marked planting and harvesting times with festivals and rituals, blending work with celebration. Historians still debate how much these gatherings boosted morale versus serving as obligations imposed by the Lord. As night falls, you crawl into your straw mattress, exhausted but alive. The stars twinkle faintly through the window, a silent promise of another day. Tomorrow you will rise again, trudging through mud and toil, bound by duty and survival. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope remains that one day this cycle might break and a different life might begin. Night deepens around the manor like a heavy cloak, and you find yourself back in the cramped quarters shared with other servants. The room is dimly lit by a single flickering candle, its light casting dancing shadows on the rough stone walls. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a thin straw pallet on the cold floor. It offers little comfort after a long day of back-breaking labor. You lie down, muscles aching, and the weight of exhaustion pulls your eyelids shut. Yet your mind drifts, restless, turning over the endless cycle of your existence. The life of a medieval servant is a tightrope, walk between endurance and survival. There's no room for complaint. Complaining could mean punishment or dismissal. Instead, you carry on quietly, blending into the background, like the walls themselves. A well-known fact is that servants were legally bound to the manor, sometimes through a system called serfdom, which tied them to the land and lord for life. Freedom was a rare and distant dream, yet even within this bleak framework, there were moments of small rebellion and humanity. You share whispered jokes, stolen bread, and brief friendships with fellow servants. These bonds are lifelines. Here's a quirky detail. Some servants kept secret trinkets-worn coins, small carved figures, or a lock of hair as private treasures, tokens of hope or memory. Historians still debate the degree of autonomy servants. Were they mere property, or did they possess a hidden social agency that shaped their lives in subtle ways? As you listen to the night sounds, the creaking of beams, distant footsteps, the occasional bark of a dog, you reflect on the manor itself. This imposing stone structure is both your prison and your home, a place filled with stark contrasts, grandeur for some, hardship for others. Your thoughts flicker to the lords and ladies upstairs, draped in fine fabrics and warmed by thick tapestries. Their lives seem a world apart, yet dependent on your labor. You recall the stories told in hushed tones, how some lords were cruel, others indifferent, and a few surprisingly kind. But kindness was a rarity, not a rule. A grim historical fact. Punishments for servants ranged from fines and beatings to imprisonment or forced labor. Laws favored the lord's rights overwhelmingly. Despite this, some servants found subtle ways to assert dignity by perfecting their crafts, sharing knowledge, or quietly resisting unfair treatment. You remember the old healer woman among the servants, whose remedies and charms brought comfort when official medicine failed. Her skills were both feared and respected. Curiously, superstition blended seamlessly with practical knowledge in servant communities. Folk beliefs influenced decisions about health, luck, and protection. Historians still debate whether these beliefs were simply superstition or an early form of community, medicine, and psychology. As you lie back, you feel the day's fatigue give way to a quiet calm. The hardships of the day fade, replaced by the soft murmur of voices and the gentle rustle of fabric from nearby rooms. You take comfort in the small rituals that mark the end of each day, like the shared prayers before sleep or the whispered good nights. A light joke comes to mind. If only the lords knew how much work went into making their life so comfortable. They might just get up and help us once in a while. Your breath slows, syncing with the rhythm of the manor settling into sleep. The candle guttering low mirrors the fading of your worries. Outside, the wind carries the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a reminder of the world beyond these walls, vast, unpredictable, and free. You close your eyes, imagining the fields, the kitchen fires, the bustling household parts of this endless cycle. A final, thoughtful fact: despite their hardships, many servants pass down stories and skills to their children, building a lineage of endurance and quiet strength. Historians still explore how these oral traditions preserved knowledge and culture amid adversity. As sleep finally wraps you in its embrace, the harshness of your life softens into a dreamscape of possibility. And though the morning will bring another day of toil, for now you rest. The relentless march of history carries on, but tonight you find peace. Now, as you drift deeper into rest, feel the weight of the day's struggles dissolve like mist in morning light. The stone walls of the manor recede, replaced by soft, open fields beneath a vast, starlit sky. Your breath eases, slow and steady, like the gentle lull of a distant stream. Remember, the life of a medieval servant was hard, often merciless, but it was also woven with threads of resilience and quiet courage. In the midst of cold, smoke, and endless labor, moments of laughter, friendship, and hope flickered like fragile candles in the dark. You are not alone in your journey through time. Countless souls have walked these same worn paths, their stories whispered on the wind now. Let the softness of night cradle you, the hum of the fan blending with your steady heartbeat. Release your worries, surrender to the calm dot. May your dreams carry you far from the hardships of stone and toil to places where peace and rest are plentiful. Good night and sweet dreams. Asterisk.